Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mr. Eliphas Levi. This is Transcendental Magic, its doctrine and its ritual. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, let us continue our exploration with Chapter 14, Transmutations. Sphera Lunae Septenarium Auxilium. St. Augustine questioned seriously whether Apuleius could have been changed into an ass by a Thessalonian sorceress, and theologians have long debated about the transformation of Nebuchadnezzar into a wild beast, which things merely prove that the eloquent doctor of Hippo was unacquainted with magical secrets, and that the theologians in question have not advanced far in exegesis. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and wander out onto a limb here and say that this transmutations, right, the ability to change you into something else is perfectly fine on a metaphysical level, right? You can take who you were and transform it into who you want to be. No problem. That transmutation is no problem whatsoever. But if you think that you're going to manifest yourself into a werewolf, you're probably wrong, right? I cannot say empirically that you're wrong because I have not had nearly enough life experience with everyone on the planet to say that there are no werewolves. But if there are, the government is exceedingly well adapted to hiding them worldwide, right? It would not be in just this one particular country or any particular country. It would be widespread. There would be many, many, many of them. And if there were actually werewolves running around, we would at least learn about some attacks. Now, personally, I don't think the government is that competent. I really don't. They weren't able to hide JFK assassination, which they conducted. They weren't able to hide the Bay of Pigs. They weren't able to hide pretty much anything, right? They don't have the capacity to really be all that secretive. And so, to me, this is probably a no. Now, once again, we are dealing with magic and the miraculous, and it is entirely a possibility, but it is exceedingly small as a possibility, right? In the exact same way that we are not able to transmute lead into gold through some magical process, as far as we know, that has never actually been done, right? There's been no witnesses to it. There's been witnesses to people spending money, and that's not a witness to creating money, right? In the exact same way, we do not have any evidence whatsoever that anyone ever on the planet, ever at all, has ever transmuted themselves into a different type of being. Nobody has ever shapeshifted into a dog or a frog or an ass. Now, one of the least believable things and one of the more easily provable things is that that did not happen, right? Nebuchadnezzar, right? There are a lot of things that are true in the Bible, but the Bible is not the truth, right? It holds many, 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 many untruths, and many of them are easily proven. We have the whole Bible study up here if you are confused about that, but there's 162 videos, pretty close to 162 hours, where we read through the Bible and saw what it said, and it said that you cannot trust it. That is what it said. It was directly contradictory, often in the same chapter, or in the same book, even in the same chapter inside of that book, directly contradicting itself. Those two things can't be true at the same time, and therefore, falsity. So, anything you're taking from the Bible, take it with a grain of salt. Especially Nebuchadnezzar turning into a wild beast and eating grass. That can't be an allegory. That absolutely has to be the truth, right? Now, are there mental illnesses where people think that they are animals? Yeah, there is that. There are people that run around with tails stuck up in their butthole, right? That is a real thing. That is wild, right? That is definite imbalance in life. You are definitely not thinking correctly if you think that you are an animal. Period, the end. In the exact same way that if you think your genitals need to be cut off or changed, you are not thinking correctly, then the exact same way. If you believe that you are an animal, seek professional help. You need it. Back to the text. We are concerned in this chapter with different and more incredible marvels, which are at the same time incontestable. Incontestable is a big word. Let's see. I refer to lycanthropy, or the nocturnal transformation of men into wolves, so celebrated in rural tales of the twilight by the histories of werewolves. Oh boy. Now, maybe I'm reading this wrong. Am I reading this wrong? Y'all let me know in the comments if I'm reading this wrong. But what he just said was, I am more concerned with things that we can prove, right? Incontestable is something you can prove. And I refer to lycanthropy, which absolutely cannot be proven, right? We have zero conclusive evidence in the entire history of ever that this was actually a thing, right? People believe all kinds of wild things, right? If someone dies and then a couple of days later some unfortunate accident happens, they go dig that person up and cut their head off and burn them, right? That's how they used to handle things in the back days. That doesn't mean that was actually anything rising up from the dead and coming now. My interpretation of the eternal, that is not even a possibility, right? Even if you are a disincorporated soul who is completely dissatisfied with your life and really clinging hold, you cannot reanimate your corpse. That is just not going to happen. You can take possession of someone else's if they allow you to do that, and they are doing things that are kind of stupid. That is possible. But I don't believe this in the slightest at all. There is zero reason to believe this ever at all. Now, that is coming from someone who practices magic. Someone who has worked healing efforts upon themselves, and so take it with a grain of salt. It is entirely a possibility. There are very few things that I rule out entirely, but there is no reason to believe. There is zero corroborative evidence ever at all that anyone has ever been a werewolf. Hopefully that is clear. These histories are so well attested that, with a view to their explanation, skeptical science has recourse to furious mania and masquerading as animals. Now, once again, people have thought they were animals all throughout history, up to the point of dressing like them, so not outside, right? Furious mania? Yeah, you're a little bit throwed. Masquerading as animals? Yes, people still do that today. Both of those things are possible. That does not mean that they actually change physically into a werewolf. And if there is documentation that by men of science that this thing has actually happened, let me know. Drop it in the box and we will definitely address it. But as far as I am aware, there is no verifiable evidence ever in the history of ever that anyone has ever made a transformation into a wolf, or a bear, or a chipmunk, or anything. But such hypotheses are puerile and explain nothing. Let us seek elsewhere for the secret of the phenomena which have been observed on this subject, and begin with establishing, 1, that no one has ever been killed by a werewolf, except by suffocation, without effusion of blood and without wounds. What? Okay. No one has ever been killed by a werewolf without effusion of blood and without wounds. So if you are going to be killed by a werewolf, you will be torn apart as though by a wild animal. I wonder why that is. 2, that werewolves, though tracked, pursued, and even wounded, have never been killed on the spot. Imagine that. 3, that persons suspected of these transformations have always been found at home after a werewolf chase, more or less maimed, sometimes dying, but invariably in their natural form. And again, as far as I am aware, there are no reliable accounts of this. Right? I have looked at it a little bit, but I did not invest a lot of time, so again, I could be wrong, but probably not. Let us next establish phenomena of a different order. Nothing in the world is better borne out by evidence than the visible and real presence of P. Alphonsus Liguori beside the dying Pope, whilst the same personages was simultaneously seen at home, far from Rome, in prayer and ecstasy. And there can be another, like there can be twins, there can be mistakes, right? Maybe this happened. I'm completely unaware of this entire phenomenon. I do not know what he's talking about, but it appears to be some kind of projection, and that is possible, right? That I do believe. Astral projection is possible, even to the point of creating a semi-corporeal visible form. That doesn't mean that you're going to be able to touch anything or that anyone can touch you, but you can coalesce the light in such a way that you could be visible at a distance. But I have never done it. I have never had the experience with anyone else that has done it, so that is speculative. The only reason that I say that it is a possibility is because the mechanics of it are within the realm of possibility. I know that astral projection is a thing. That I do know. Right? Now, I can't prove that to you because I don't have the experience. Right? I have been able to do it, but not reliably, repeatably, in the way that I would like before I was to try to evidence it, right? And so there's that. But I know that the projection is possible. I do know that the effect in a visible plane is a possibility as well. That's to say that you, through force of will, can create an apparition. And again, I am not practiced enough to try to demonstrate, but I have sufficient reason for myself to believe that it is a possibility, even though I am not practiced enough in order to do it reliably in a way that I would be comfortable trying to show other people. You can, however, do it. And because these two things are possible, I assume that it is a possibility to do the two things together. And if that is true, then this is possible. I mean, hopefully that is clear that this is still speculative, but it is based upon things that I personally know to be true but cannot prove to anyone else. And so I can tell you about it. I'm not here to convince you about it. But it would explain that. I mean, that is not a transfer of physical incarnation form. That is not transforming yourself into a wolf or a vampire or a squirrel, right? Or an ass. That is projecting your will outside of yourself in a manner that someone else can see it. And that is probably possible. Further, the simultaneous presence of the missionary Francis Xavier in several places at one time has been no less strictly demonstrated. And again, I do believe that that is a possibility. It will be said that these are miracles, but we reply that miracles, when they are genuine, are simply facts for science. I do not disagree with that as well. I have affected physical change within myself. Right? I have healed my throat, and I have healed my shoulder, I am healing my back, I am healing my leg. These are the things that are happening. Whether or not that is metaphysical is up for debate, but for me it is not. For me, I firmly believe that all of these things are because of the magical practices that I use, and those center around prayer, fasting, and meditation. They don't have any rituals. It's not about the tools. It is about simply prayer, fasting, and meditation, and I have been able to effect miraculous change within myself. I do believe that that is repeatable, right? Now, as far as I am aware, nobody has repeated it yet, but I am giving the information as freely as possible. Right? There is a paywall for some of it for a reason, but as freely as possible, I am relaying to people, you can do this. Here's how I did this. See if you can reproduce this. That would be science, right? If I have been able to do it, I give you the information and you can reproduce it. That would be scientific. Now, I believe that what I have done is very real. The external effects that I have had, I believe that those are very real as well. But that is simply my belief. It is a speculative thing until it has been proven from science. But I do believe that the miracles that I have worked are explainable through science. Now, that is not science who thinks that they know everything already, right? That is not the Big Bang. That is not dogmata. That is not black holes, right? All three things which are a little bit wild, but This is not that science. This is the science who is interested in finding new things. This is the science that is not so clouded by what they already know that they cannot accept new information, because there is definitely new information, and we call some of it the placebo effect. Your mind can affect things. Back to the text. Apparitions of persons dear to us coinciding with the moment of their death are phenomena of the same order and attributable to the same cause. And again, that is a possibility, right? That is not, my soul is lingering here and therefore I am a disincorporated spirit. That is I just died. What's on my mind? The person I love. So the first thing that I'm going to pop to is going to be the person I love. And then reassimilation, right? That is how that mechanic's probably going to work. Now, I don't believe that you should be calling spirits that have been dead for a while for any reason whatsoever. Now, we talked about that in necromancy. And so just be extremely careful if you see apparitions. Right? Entities can deceive you. But again, this is something that is probably possible. We have spoken of the sidereal body, which is intermediary between the soul and the physical body. Now, this body frequently remains awake while the latter sleeps, and passes through all space, which universal magnetization opens to it. It lengthens without breaking the sympathetic chain which attaches it to our heart and brain, and it is for this reason that it is so dangerous to awaken dreamers suddenly. As a fact, too great a start may break the chain in an instant and cause death immediately. This is one of those things we cannot prove, right? It's like if you dream that you're falling and you hit the ground, you die. Well, people assume that, but you can't prove it, because everybody who died in their sleep may have fallen and hit the ground, but you won't know that, right? You don't know what they were dreaming. This is an assumption that people make because people died suddenly in their sleep and they have had dreams of falling. It could be a related thing, it absolutely could, but that doesn't mean that it is. The same thing with the waking someone too suddenly, right? I have been a combat person, right? I was in the United States Navy, and I was combat deployed in 2 separate engagements, and several times we were wakened abruptly. Right? Many times over the course of my duration in the Navy, we were wakened abruptly, starting in boot camp and going all the way through to the end. And as far as I am aware, not a single person died from being woken too suddenly. That is not even taken into account that every single night somebody comes by and knocks on the rack and says, "Hey, bro, it's time to get up for watch." Right? That is a wake up suddenly as well. Nobody dies from that. As far as I am aware, nobody on the entirety of the history of the Navy has ever died from being wakened too suddenly. Now, that is not to say that that is not a possibility, but it is extremely unlikely. This is, again, someone explaining a phenomena that happens with something that they think might be the cause of it. The form of our sidereal body is conformed to the habitual condition of our thoughts, and it modifies, in the long run, the characteristics of the material body. This is why Swedenborg, in his somnambulistic intuitions, frequently beheld spirits in the shape of various animals. Let us now make bold to say that a werewolf is nothing else but the sidereal body of a man whose savage and sanguinary instincts are typified by the wolf, who, further, whilst his sleeping phantom wanders over the country, is sleeping painfully in his bed, and dreams that he is actually a wolf. What makes the werewolf visible is the almost somnambulistic excitement caused by the fright of those who behold it, or else the tendency, more particularly in simple country persons, to enter into direct communication with the astral light, which is the common medium of visions and dreams. So what makes the werewolf visible is the excitement caused by it being visible. Is that what you're trying to tell me? Right? The excitement caused by the fright of those who behold it makes it visible. So being able to see it makes it where you can see it. Okay. This is explaining something that does not necessarily correlate. Again, the hurts inflicted on the werewolf really wound the sleeping person by the otic and sympathetic congestion of the astral light and by the correspondence of the immaterial with the material body. Now, we are going to hit on another thing right here because, yeah, if it is possible that you can astrally project, which I believe, if it is possible that you can create a physical emanation, which I believe, does not necessarily mean that that physical emanation can produce harm upon another person. Now, it does not necessarily restrict that from happening, but it is going to be exceedingly difficult. I mean, it is not easy to affect things right in front of you. It is not easy to affect things that you can actually touch. It is much less easy to affect things at a distance. It is much less easy to affect things which are not your immediate concern. So, concerning someone else, their bodily health absolutely concerns them. To be able to bite someone in an ethereal form and it cause damage, I'm going to go ahead and put a no on that one too, even though that is entirely speculative. Right? That is a multiplication of effects that would have to take place. Right? In order to be able to affect in a manner, you would have to be intentional about it, not dreaming. And again, I am also going to reiterate, never do anything to anyone else without explicit consent. Many persons will believe that they are dreaming when they read such things as these and will ask whether we are really ourselves awake, but we will only request men of science to reflect upon the phenomena of gestation and upon the influence of the imagination of women on the form of their offspring. And once again, I am going to point out that this is a no. It is not that you cannot, right? Because that is speculative. But there has been nobody on the entirety of the planet who has ever said, I want my child to be born with a mental deficiency. Now, I hold a special place for special needs. Don't get it twisted. My homies with the chromies, they're cool with me. I love my Downs people. But nobody has ever once in the history of the entire human race said, you know what? I want my baby to have Down syndrome. That has never happened. And nobody has ever said, I want my baby to be born with a clubbed foot or a cleft palate or any other abnormality. Nobody has ever done that. Ever. No woman has ever imagined, like, on a consistent basis, their child, which they are gestating, as anything less than perfect. Right? That they may fear that there is something wrong, but they are not imagining this thing to be. Right? Now, there is a certain level of fear becomes reality. That is a truth. But to affect the body of something, again, it's going to take a severe degree of intentionality. This right here is a way of explaining away birth defects. Right? Well, obviously, she was imagining something wrong. Now, that is simply because they did not know what genetics were at all. Right? There was some understanding of passing down genes, yes, but the mechanics by which that worked, no. And we still have not isolated all of the elements. We still do not have the electron microscope. There is still a whole lot of things at this point in time which we do not know. But one of the things that we know now, your imagination is probably not going to make your child be born with a birth defect. A woman who had been present at the execution of a man who was broken upon a wheel gave birth to a child with all its limbs shattered. There are birth defects. Correlation and causation are not the same. Let anyone explain how the impression produced upon the soul of the mother by a horrible spectacle could so have reacted on the child. Yes, please explain that. And we will in turn explain why blows received in dreams can really bruise and even grievously wound the body of him who receives them in imagination. Above all, when his body is suffering and subjected to nervous and magnetic influences? Well, you just gave the fucking answer right there. Once again, we have something absolutely explainable, right? What happens in dreams? Like, if you gotta pee, right? And you dream that you're peeing, what happens? You wake up in a wet bed, right? Isn't that how that works? Pretty sure that's how that works. So, what happens if you imagine you're in combat? Maybe you're pinching yourself or hitting yourself. These things happen. Absolutely 100%. Now, depending upon your imagination, depends upon how active you get, and your nightmares absolutely fuel more than the good ones, right? But that would absolutely explain this. You accidentally hitting yourself in the middle of the night. Like, I know that I've woken up hitting myself. I know that I've woken up with my arm dead because I was laying on it and I was dreaming that my arm got cut off, right? These are things that happen. These are realities in life. You assimilate the sounds that you hear. Like if somebody's knocking on the door, you're going to hear that in your dreams. You're going to assimilate that and turn that into something in your dreams. That explains this, right? Things that are actually happening in real life. Now, I'm not saying that you're beating yourself up on purpose, right? But it is entirely possible to pinch yourself to the point of bruising. You can do that. You can hit yourself to the point where you bruise. You can do that. You can lay on your hand in the wrong way and bruise yourself. That is a possibility. All of those explain this, right? It is not necessarily something magical happening, right? In the exact same way, right? There was this public execution, and they put somebody upon a wheel and then shattered him, right? That is a horrible thing. It's probably a Christian. But was there only one pregnant woman watching? Is that it? There was just one pregnant woman out of the entire population that watched it? No, but there was just one woman that had a problem after watching it. You're trying to explain something with something that's probably not related. Can it be? Yeah, anything's possible. Almost anything anyway. And so it is in the realm of possibilities, just again, very low on that probability list. Back to the text. To these phenomena and to the occult laws which govern them must be referred the effects of bewitchment, of which we shall speak hereafter. Diabolical obsessions and the majority of nervous diseases which affect the brain are wounds inflicted on the nervous mechanism by the astral light when perverted, that is, absorbed or projected in abnormal proportions. And again, you are trying to explain something without the understanding. Right? Diabolical obsessions. You know what we call that these days? ADD. Or ADHD or OCD, or one of the 3-letter, 4-letter combinations that we like to use for ourselves. Right? It is diabolical obsessions is the primary focus is on this one particular thing. We call autistic people this. Right? That does not mean that it is demonic. It does not mean that it is magical at all. The majority of nervous diseases which affect the brain, there's a bunch of those. Depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, like the list goes on and on. There are all kinds of nervous diseases which affect the brain. And all of them are inflicted by the nervous mechanism, by the astral light when perverted. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, that is not to say that there might not be something perverted in some of these people who suffer from these mental illnesses. But mostly no. Mostly no. It is, for the most part, I'm going to piss everybody off right here. I'm going to piss everybody off with this one. Y'all ready? This one's going to piss everybody off. If you're watching this video and you can function as a human being, you almost certainly do not have any of those diseases. You don't have OCD, ADD, ADHD, AUHD, high definition, whatever. Like, you don't have those things. If you are able to function in real life without medication, you don't have those things. There are people who do. People who are autistic are in a zone. They are separated from normal thinking people. That is not to say that we need to be casting judgment upon them. They're in a different level of understanding. They are doing something differently than we do. These things exist, right? You, however, almost certainly do not have them. If you can function without medication, you're just normal. Everybody has distractions. Everybody has hyper-focused activities at times. All of these are normal functions of the brain to keep you on track. People who are autistic can't deviate, right? Most of them are nonverbal or extremely low communication. And I'm not picking on autism, it's just a really good one, because if you think that you're just a little bit autistic, you're wrong. You're not. Autism is the non-ability to function. That's what that is. ADD is the inability to focus without medication. If you can focus and it takes effort, it's not you. You almost certainly do not have any of those problems. Those problems are limitations that you are claiming upon yourself. If you can function in real life, don't claim those things for you. Don't say, I'm autistic because you have a little bit of I'm going to focus on trains, so I'm autistic. No, you're not. Shut the fuck up. I'm so sick of hearing it. I'm so sick of it. Like, I've got neighbors that do it. I've got friends that do it. I've got family that do it. Well, it was my ADD, right? I talk about my SI demon all the time. That is something I am attempting to overcome, right? It is a natural overlooking that I have to take into account. Or my TE trickster, right? I talk about that because it is something that I have to overcome. It is something that I have to assimilate. It's not a disease, right? The proclivity that I have towards disorganization doesn't mean that I don't have the capacity to organize. I'm just lazy, and so I don't. Now, again, this is for the majority of people. There are exceptions to every rule, but for the most part, if you can function at all without medication, you should be functioning without medication. And you should not be claiming for yourself any mental deficiency, right? That is creating something in your life. The things you speak become your reality. Be exceedingly careful about the things that you speak. Told you I was going to piss you off. Back to the text. All extraordinary and extranatural tensions of the will predispose to obsessions and nervous diseases. Enforced celibacy, asceticism, hatred, ambition, rejected love are so many generative principles of infernal forms and influences. All right, so all is always a big word, right? All, those are intimating every single instance ever in the history of ever. That is a big word. All extraordinary and extranatural tensions of the will predispose to obsessions and nervous diseases. No. Enforced celibacy, asceticism, hatred, ambition, rejected love. Those are all out of balance, right? Celibacy is out of balance. Asceticism, out of balance. Hatred, out of balance. Ambition, not so much. Rejected love is a incapacity to understand that was not meant for you, right? These are things, they are all real, but they are not necessarily spiritual. Paracelsus says that the menstruations of women beget phantoms in the air, and from this standpoint, convents would be seminaries for nightmares, while the devils might be compared to those heads of the Hydra of Lern, which were reproduced eternally and propagated in the very blood from their wounds. I'm not even going to deal with that one. The phenomena of possession among the Ursulines of London, so fatal to urban grandeur, have been misconstrued. The nuns were really possessed by hysteria and fanatical imitation of the secret thoughts of their exorcists, which were transmitted to their nervous systems by the astral light. As hysteria is a thing. I'm gonna ask you a question. How many witches were burned in Salem? Do you know the answer? The answer is 0. Women were burned in Salem. None of them were witches. None of them. As far as we know, not a single person who could actually perform magic in any capacity whatsoever was burned at the stake in Salem. But yet, they were absolutely convinced that it was witches. And to the point where they were willing to set people on fire and stand around and laugh about it. Right? That is mass hysteria. That is what happened in Salem. It was a contagion. The exact same thing here. Right? One person gets this thing happening and people pay attention and she gets attention, and then that causes some jealousy, and so somebody else does the same thing, and now you got 2 and it gets some attention, and then you get more jealousy, and then more people join in and it becomes a mass hysteria event. That's kind of how that works. No witches were burned in Salem. Not a single one. It was not. The secret thoughts of their exorcists, which were transmitted to their nervous systems by astral light. That, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and stand on. They received the impression of all the hatreds which this unfortunate priest had conjured up against him, and this holy interior communication seemed diabolical and miraculous to themselves. Hence, in this tragical affair, everyone acted sincerely, even to Labourdemont, who, in his blind execution of the prejudged verdicts of Cardinal Richelieu, believed that he was fulfilling at the same time the duties of a true judge, and as little suspected himself of being a follower of Pontius Pilate, as he would have recognized in the skeptical and libertine curé of Saint Pierre de Mouche, a disciple and martyr of Christ. The possession of the nuns of Louviers is scarcely more than a copy of those of London. Loudun. I thought that was London. The devils invent little and plagiarize one another. Yeah, you could say that. The devil Levi. The process of Gaufridry and Magdalene de la Pelude possess stranger features, for in this case the victims are their own accusers. Gaufridi confessed that he was guilty of depriving a number of women of the power to defend themselves against his seductions by simply breathing in their nostrils. Makes you wonder if he had a progenitor of chloroform or, something else along those lines. Opioids were definitely a thing. A young and beautiful girl of noble family, who had been thus insufflated, described in the greatest detail scenes wherein the unchaste seemed to vie with the monstrous and grotesque. Such are the ordinary hallucinations of false mysticism and ill-kept celibacy. Gaufridi and his mistress were obsessed by their mutual chimeras, and the brains of the one reflected the nightmares of the other. Was not the Marquis de Sade himself infectious for certain depleted and diseased natures? Yeah. The first case, absolutely explainable by chemical processes. Absolutely. The date rape drugs existed even then, even if they weren't the same formulations. People had filters and tinctures and all kinds of things that they put together, and some of them absolutely would cause the inability to think, to knock you out, to cloud your judgment, to inebriate you in a variety of ways. Opium was a thing. Do you think that somebody spraying opium into your mouth might make something happen? I do. And so it is absolutely explainable by chemical measures. Was not the Marquis de Sade himself infectious for certain depleted and diseased natures? Yeah, absolutely. What are you? You are the sum of what you surround yourself with. And so, if you are surrounding yourself with people who like to torture people, even in a sexual manner, you're going to pick up on things. That is going to happen. You will absolutely reflect who you surround yourself with. That is why you should be exceedingly careful with the people you surround yourself with. Only surround yourself with people that you would like to mirror. And because there is a good possibility you're going to mirror them anyway. So you might as well make sure that it is something you want in your life. None of this has to be supernatural, right? What we have seen so far, none of it. The scandalous trial of Father Gerard is a new proof of the deliriums of mysticism and the singular nervous affectations which it may entail. The trances of La Cadière, her ecstasies, her stigmatas were all as real as the insensate and perhaps involuntary debauchery of her director. I'm unfamiliar with this, so I can't speak on it, but I do believe that stigmata is a thing. You can believe enough to affect the mortal. I have done so. I have changed myself. Right? I asked for healing. I got shown how to heal myself, and I used it, and I have. I can talk to you. I can sing. I can vary my voice. I can lift my arm. I can twist my back. These things are miracles, and you don't know that because you haven't been in my body. But I know that. I know that this thing in my throat disappeared miraculously. I know that my shoulder healed itself miraculously. I know that my back is doing better than it has in 15 years, miraculously. And so I know that they're true. You don't. This is something that we talk about, right? Speculative. Until someone else reproduces it, maybe it's just me making something happen to me. Maybe nobody else can do it. Maybe everybody else can do it. I believe anybody can do it because God made everybody, and therefore everybody is the same. Not exactly the same, but enough that it matters. We all breathe, we all eat, drink, we like to do frivolous activities sometimes, right? We have common things. Involuntary debauchery of her director. She accused him when he wished to withdraw from her. And the conversion of this young woman was a revenge, for there is nothing more cruel than depraved passions. So, an after effect. We've had those things happen before. If you're unfamiliar with my story, that's part of it. An influential body, which intervened in the trial of Grandier for the destruction of the possible heretic, in this case rescued Father Gerard for the honor of the order. Moreover, Grandier and Gerard attained the same results by very different means, which we shall be specially concerned in the 16th chapter. We operate by our imagination on the imagination of others, by our sidereal body on theirs, by our organs on their organs, in such a way that, by sympathy, whether of inclination or obsession, we reciprocally possess one another and identify ourselves with those upon whom we wish to act. What he is talking about, this reciprocally possessing one another, that is mirroring, right? You see the actions of someone else, and so you do it, right? If you're in a conversation with somebody and they cross their arms, there is a high possibility that you're going to do the same thing. If they lean forward like this, there is a high possibility that you're going to do the same thing. That's mirroring. That happens on a physical level, right? Or it can happen on an intellectual level. This person has these ideas, and you're like, oh, well, that makes sense, and so you start mirroring that. Reactions against such dominations frequently cause the most pronounced antipathy to succeed the keenest sympathy. Love has a tendency to unify beings, and in thus identifying, it frequently renders them rivals and, consequently, enemies, if in the depth of the two natures there is an unsociable disposition, like pride. To permeate two united souls in an equal degree with pride is to disjoin them by making them rivals. Antagonism is the necessary consequence of a plurality of gods. Fortunately, there's only one God. When we dream of a living person, either their sidereal body presents itself to ours in the astral light, or at least the reflection thereof, and our impressions at the meeting often make known the secret dispositions of the person in our regard. For example, love fashions the sidereal body of the one in the image and likeness of the other, so that the psychal medium of the woman is like a man, and that of the man is like a woman. Buddy, I think you got some problems. I think, like, besides the fact that you married a child, which is not an insignificant one, by the way, what? What you were saying here is that when you dream of a woman, it takes on the form of a man? Okay. Okay. We learned some more things about you today. It was this transfer which the Kabbalists sought to express in an occult manner when they said, in explanation of an obscure term of Genesis, God created love by placing a rib of Adam in the breast of the woman and a portion of the flesh of Eve in the breast of a man, so that at the bottom of the woman's heart there is the bone of man, while at the bottom of man's heart there is flesh of a woman. Okay, I'm like, where was that in Genesis? It's not, it's in the Kabbalah, right? Those are not the same thing, right? We've read through Genesis. We have not read through the Kabbalah yet. And so this quote is not in there, right? This entire thing right here, this isn't from Genesis, right? What Genesis says was that he took the rib of a man and made a woman. That was pretty much it. An allegory which is certainly not devoid of depth and beauty. We have referred in the previous chapter to what the masters in the Kabbalah call the embryonic condition of souls. This state, completed after the death of the person who thereby possesses another, is often commenced in life, whether by obsession or by love. I knew a young woman whose parents inspired her with a great terror, who took suddenly to inflicting upon an inoffensive person the very acts she dreaded in them. Projection? That's possible. I knew another who, after participating in an evocation concerned with a guilty woman suffering in the next world for certain eccentric acts, began to imitate, without any reason, the actions of the dead person. She wasn't, right? There was no correlation there. It was completely random. She wasn't participating in a ritual to call in a spirit. That wasn't happening. And she wasn't maybe a little bit mentally unsound. Maybe she invited in a spirit who took possession. That couldn't have happened because you know necromancy to the point where it's proficient for you, right, Mr. Levi? Check out yesterday's video where he quite explicitly stated that he has no idea what he is doing and cannot explain. He doesn't know what he's talking about here. I knew another after participating in an evocation. I tell you not to call upon the dead, right? Didn't I tell you that many times? Participating in an evocation concerned with a guilty woman suffering in the next world. Sounds like it might be a disincorporated spirit, doesn't it? Sounds like maybe it's holding on to some hostility, doesn't it? For certain eccentric acts, began to imitate without any reason. And she didn't participate in an evocation, no reason whatsoever. The actions of the dead person does not intimate that there might be some possession going on at all. I mean, he says it, and people, man. To this occult power must be attributed the terrible influence resident in parental malediction, which is feared by all nations on earth, as also the imminent danger of magical operations when anyone has not reached the isolation of true adepts. You can absolutely influence other people with magic, especially unintentionally, if you have not reached adeptship right now. You have, if you can move the forces, reached at least a level of adeptship. Whether that is a true adept or not, who knows? Now, I don't claim mastery, I claim adept, right? I am able to do some things. I am an adept. But I don't claim to be a master adept or even a high level one. I can do things. They're reproducible for me, and I'm here to tell you about them. But that doesn't mean that I am some master by any means. But magical operations have dangers. That is why I include the warnings. That is why we talk about levels of responsibility. Right? You are responsible for the information that you have. If you don't know that something's wrong, then it's more excusable than knowing something is wrong. The example I used in the book is you and someone else walk into a room and there's this strange object sitting on a pedestal, and you don't know what it is. You pick it up, you point it at your friend, and you pull the little thing on it, and it kills him. That is unintentional. You didn't know that was a gun. But if you did, and you walk into the room and you're like, oh, look, there's a pistol. Bang. That is a whole different level, right? One is unintentional without knowledge. The other is intentional with knowledge. When you have the knowledge, you are responsible for that. If you know that these things are possible and you are practicing these things and things happen, you are responsible for the things that happen. No one else, you. Make sure you are fully aware of that before you attempt any part of what I talk about. I start with levels of responsibility because you are responsible for the things that you learn. You are responsible for the things that you put into action. And if you are taking action thinking that you're not going to have to take responsibility, you are wrong. 100% wrong. Very few things I go 100% on. Many of them in this book, apparently, but that is one of them. You will face repercussions, positive or negative. There are responses to your actions. Now, parental malediction, that is negligence. That is abuse, right? That is what that is. And so, yeah, that should be feared by all nations on earth, right? Hitler was not loved as a child. Mao Zedong was not loved as a child. Pol Pot was not loved as a child. There was parental malediction that happened there, undoubtedly. That is the result of that, to an extreme. We see lesser effects of that all of the time. All of these little children running around protesting without any clue about what they're actually protesting or whether they are actually protesting factual things, right? Protest. Do what you want. As long as it is peaceful, I don't care. You can be mad that the grass is green or the sky is blue. Go out there with a sign and scream. I don't give a rat's ass. I mean, we'll put it that way. But if you are causing violence, that's a whole different thing. And if you are incorrect, like you're calling in effects. You are asking for something. And if you are asking for something and you are factually incorrect about it, you're still going to get it. Maybe not to the effect that you want, however. Be exceedingly careful about the things that you call into your life. All right, back to the text. This virtue of sidereal transmutation, which really exists in love, explains the allegorical marvels of the wand of Circe. Apuleius speaks of a Thessalonian woman who changed herself into a bird. He won the affections of her servant to discover the secrets of the mistress and succeeded only in transforming himself into an ass in a couple of ways. This allegory contains the most concealed secrets of love. This is telling you that first, if you're going to seek mastery, seek it from the master. Maybe, right? He went to a servant instead of to the woman who changed herself. That is stupid, right? So first off, don't learn from someone who doesn't know. Second off, changing yourself into an ass is a reflection about something inside of you. And so, yeah. Now, I'm not saying that it is possible, right? It may be that I've done miraculous things, but I have zero reason to believe that anyone has ever changed himself into an animal of any type. That is not to say that you cannot project yourself into an animal, right? Take your will and put it in there, even though that is stupid. That is something you can probably do. Farsight in that manner is probably possible, but again, probably stupid. Again, the Kabbalists say that when a man falls in love with a female elementary, undine, sylphide, or nomide, as the case may be, she becomes immortal with him, or otherwise, he dies with her. We have already seen that elementaries are imperfect and, as yet, mortal men. Alright, so I do believe in this theory of spiritual evolution. It begins with the primary plane of existence, which is the elements, right? All of the primal elements by themselves, and progresses through steps. We're on the 5th step. The elementaries are on the 6th step. They exist in a different plane, on a different level of existence than us. There may be sexual relations possible, probably not offspring. That's not to say that it is not possible, because they have understandings that we don't, but also, who are you sleeping with? An undine? A sylphide? A nomide? Come on now. Now, elementaries are imperfect as yet mortal men. Who knows, right? That is one of the things. I have opened myself up to these elementaries. I have not yet received any of them in communication back, so I cannot speak with authority on that. That is all speculative. I have seen an angel once. I have had out-of-body experiences where I was pulled from myself, but I didn't see anybody. Like I felt a comforting presence. I was held, but I never saw what held me. But as far as I know, they are not mortal men in the way that we understand mortality. The revelation we have mentioned, which has been regarded merely as a fable, is therefore the dogma of moral solidarity in love, which is itself a foundation of love, and alone explains all its sanctity and all its power. Really. Who then is this Circe that changes her worshippers into swine, while, so soon as she is subjected to the bond of love, her enchantments are destroyed? She is the ancient courtesan, the marble woman of all the ages, a woman who is without love, absorbs and degrades all who come near her. She who loves, on the other hand, diffuses enthusiasm, nobility, and life. Now, Circe is a story. It's a fable. It may be based upon a truth, but it is a fable. What happens if you have an exceedingly beautiful woman and a group of men? Is there some pig-like action, some swine-like things happening? Yeah, that is entirely true. Men act like pigs. Right? Now, I hopefully remove myself from that, but I have my times too. And so, if there is a beautiful woman in a group of men acting like pigs, maybe she's encouraging it somehow, right? And then she becomes absorbed in love, and all of a sudden all of these pigs are no longer her concern. She's no longer encouraging the behavior of the pigs, and so they're gone. There was much talk in the last century about an adept accused of charlatanism who was termed in his lifetime the divine Caligostrio. It is known that he practiced evocations, and that in this art he was surpassed only by the illuminated Shropopher. And we have a footnote. See, in the ritual, Shropopher's secrets and formulas for evocation. It is said also that he boasted of his power in binding sympathies, and that he claimed to be in possession of the secret of the great work. But that which rendered him still more famous was a certain elixir of life, which immediately restored to the aged the strength and vitality of youth. The basis of this composition was Malvoios wine, and it was obtained by distilling the sperm of certain animals with the sap of certain plants. We are in possession of the recipe, but our reasons for withholding it will be readily understood. Alright, so that is going to be the end of this one, and there's only 4 pages in the next one, so I'm tempted to do it, but I'm not going to. We'll hold off and do it tomorrow. I think that it is actually dealing with this, but we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up talking about this real freaking quick. Alright, so it is said that he boasted of his power in binding sympathies, and he can claim to be in possession of the secret of the great work, right? That is the elixir of life, but that which rendered him still more famous was the elixir of life. Now, maybe he's talking about the philosopher's stone was the secret of the great work. Maybe it's just the gnosis. But he had a certain elixir of life, which immediately restored to the aged the strength and vitality of youth. Now, it is based in wine and obtained by distilling the sperm of certain animals with the sap of certain plants. That is the discovery that I would never make. There is a 0% chance that I am going to attempt, endeavor, go about in any way, shape, or form making a drink from the sperm of any animal on the planet. Simply not going to happen. Beyond the realm of possibility, and so I am perfectly fine with dying. But it is important to note one thing that is absolutely certain, that if Mr. Levi, Mr. Oath Breaker Extraordinaire, was actually in possession of this recipe, and that it actually worked in the manner in which it is stated here, that he would have taken it, that he would still be alive today, he would not have died. That is a certainty. He was not nearly well situated in himself enough to be comfortable with the afterlife at all, right? That is why he broke the oaths so many times. He had no capacity for magical endeavors. That is evidenced by the necromancy, where he said straight out, I failed in this. I did not do this in the manner that I thought it was going to work at all, right? So he did not have possession. It is entirely possible to be able to pull these energies and to do things with them and not get it right. As a matter of fact, I would venture to say that that has been the practice so far. That's not to say that ever in history that it was not real, that people did not have a good understanding of it. It is entirely possible. I discovered it on my own, but none of the studies which we have done so far, none of them have given any reality to the situation whatsoever, right? None of them have given you any instructions which are reproducible, right? They tell you to meditate, fast, and pray. Yeah, sure, I do that too, right? They tell you that you can do these things, and yeah, I do that too. They don't tell you how. I do. That's behind the paywall part, but it's there. You can find it for free. It is contained in the Infinite Integrations playlist. It is contained in the Esoterica playlist. You got to dig for it there. Behind the paywall, it's readily available. For that reason, right? You have to have the dedication to at least invest something into it. If you are not willing to invest into it, it is better not to do it. It is better not to even attempt to. Because if you don't know what you're doing, you wind up confusing everyone and creating unwanted effects. The things that we see here, these unwanted effects, the possession of the woman, all of these various things that he's talking about that can be explained, that's the natural effects of doing it wrong, or even being around someone who is doing it wrong. But that brings us to the end. I wanted to leave that up so we could talk about that real quick, because I'm never making that drink. It's simply not going to happen. Now, you can talk to me about the sap of certain plants, not of certain people. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment, not too much confusion, maybe even a little levity to a series of somewhat difficult topics. I understand I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional. It is not something I apologize for. Pointing out the differences here, that's why I'm doing it, right? That's literally the whole reason we're doing this. Is Mr. Levi had a very base level understanding of what he's talking about. He was taking things that other people had talked about, and he's relaying them as though he was a master at it. Now, he has told us several times, but like the most notable is the one in necromancy where he's like, I tried this thing with all of the correct tools and the ritual, and everything was done correctly, and it didn't come out the way that I thought. That's telling you something, right? He doesn't know what he's talking about. The fact that he forsook his oath to the Catholic Church, he forsook his oath to the child that he married, he forsook his oath to the Masons that he tried to join, he forsook his oath to magic, to return to the Catholic Church that he had forsook his oath about. He was an oath breaker all the way through, and that right there automatically off the top lets you know that he had no enlightenment. If you can break an oath, you have not reached this. I promise you that. If you can make a promise to someone and know full well that you are going to break that, you have not reached enlightenment at all. It's not a thing. If you are continuously malcontent, you have not reached enlightenment. If you are suffering from depression, you have not reached enlightenment. If you are suffering from anxiety, you have not reached enlightenment. Now, again, this isn't the chapter to talk about enlightenment in. We've talked about it in other places, but you attain it through prayer, fasting, and meditation. You don't need any outside influence. You can go directly to the source and receive the illumination. I have several resources available if you would like to do so. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment. If you agree or disagree with anything that was said, put it in the box down below, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me read or discuss in the manner that we are doing here, drop that in the box as well. And if you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of my book. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.